many owls would you need to see in one day before you felt like something was wrong? This is a great question. Let's talk about it for a second. And if you stick around long enough, this is going to end up being a conversation about God and spirituality and miracles and Christianity. So bonus points if you can figure out how exactly I'm going to tie all these things together. So I'm going to modify this owl question a little bit and ask, how many strange things need to happen to you over the course of, say, a few weeks for you to determine that what is going on is somewhat supernatural? So let's assume for a second that you have a favorite mug, and this mug lives on the right side of your desk. You like having it on the right side because it's easier for you to reach because you are right-handed, and your mug is always on the right side. No exceptions. But one day, you leave your home and you come back into your room at the end of the day and you find that your mug is now on the left side of your desk. And you think, oh, well, maybe you accidentally put it there. It's not really that deep. So you just move it back to the right. Your day goes as normal. You go to sleep. The next day you leave home. You come back and your mug is now on the left side again. Now on day 2, you think that's a bit weird, but again, it could happen, maybe something is going on. So you move it back to the right where it belongs, no problem. Same thing happens day 3, you find your mug again is now on the left side. Now the first part of this question is, how many days does this need to happen before you realize that something strange is going on? And at what point does your theory on what is going on become supernatural? So let's say this has been going on for a week and you officially declare that something sus is going on. And your first theory is that your roommate is messing with you. They come into the room when you're not around and they move your mug around because they think it's funny or something. So you start locking your door every time you go out to work. But you come back and your mug has still been moved. What do you think then? Now we get to a very important question in this whole thought experiment. What do you do when you have to choose between two options? One option is impossible, but it is simple. And the other option is possible, but it is very improbable and very, very complicated. So you have been locking your room, but your mug has still been moving. Here are your two options. A, something supernatural is happening, maybe ghosts, a pretty simple explanation. Or B, your roommate has been breaking into your room, kind of removing the lock, just so they can come in and play this prank on you. Now, this second option seems unlikely, but it is possible. So let's say at some point your roommate goes out of town and you know for a fact that they are gone. You saw them get on that plane. They are out of town. You still lock your door, but it turns out your mug still moves whenever you leave for work. Well, you might think maybe your roommate is so into this prank that they gave someone their key and they've been paying them to come in, break in, and move your mug when you're away from work. It's a very well thought out, very expensive, very meticulously planned prank. This is very unlikely, but it's possible. It's very possible that this is happening. Your other option is ghosts. So which do you choose? Now, Occam's razor might tell you that in solving a problem, the answer that is the simplest is probably true. But is Occam's razor apt in this situation? Does Occam's razor make sense in this situation? Which is easier? Which is simpler? Ghosts or this very weird convoluted plan that has your roommate paying a person to break into your room, removing the locks in a very meticulous way, just so they can move your mug and mess with you? At what point does your leading thesis on what's going on here become supernatural? Now, with all this in mind, let us talk about Christianity. Now, unless you've been living under a rock for the past 2,000 years, here's the TLDR on Christianity. Christianity is a religion centered around the teachings of Jesus, and the idea, the belief, is that Jesus died and came back from the dead. Now, in order for this part of the thought experiment to make sense, you need to play along with me here for a second. I'm going to tell you 3 things, and I need you to assume with me that they are true. 1, Jesus existed. 2, Jesus was killed. And 3, after Jesus was killed, some of his followers believed that they saw him resurrected. Now, I can't get into the historicity of these claims here because it's kind of a rabbit hole, but as far as the academic consensus is concerned, these 3 things are generally agreed to be true by historians. Now, of course, we are talking about ancient history here, and it's very difficult to say anything with full confidence when it comes to ancient history, but generally speaking, these 3 things are agreed upon. There was a man named Jesus who existed, he was killed. After he was killed, some of his followers said that they saw him again. Now, of course, this raises the question, how can this be? How did some people believe that they saw him after he had died? Did he resurrect, or is there another theory that is a bit complicated but at least is possible? And as it turns out, there are a lot of theories that are actually very entertaining. One of my favorites suggests that Jesus had a twin brother, and when people thought that they saw him raised from the dead, they were really just seeing his twin, which I think is kind of hilarious. It's kind of like a sitcom, soap opera type of drama, where people think that it's you, but it's your secret twin that no one really knew about. So that is one theory. That is a bit improbable, but it's more possible than a resurrection. Another theory that comes up is that, well, maybe the people who thought they saw him were hallucinating. And this theory is usually dismissed because hallucinations do happen, but group hallucinations are a bit unlikely to happen. The idea that multiple people can be seeing the same thing that is not there is a bit unlikely. It has been known to happen, though. And so with this story, we are left with possible options that are a bit unlikely, and we are left with a more simple explanation that is impossible, which is the resurrection. At what point does one believe in the more simple explanation? Now, one of the interesting things about this entire thought experiment is that these simple options are actually not simple, they're very complicated. I mean, ghosts would be a very complicated thing to try to wrap one's head around, as would the resurrection. So maybe there are no simple options at all. Maybe simple and complicated are kind of problematic terms in this entire conversation. So whether your roommate has paid somebody to break into your room just so they could mess with you, or whether there are ghosts operating in your room, both options might be equally complicated. Is that true? But really, at the heart of all of these questions is the question, when does one accept that something supernatural is happening? Now, maybe you who are watching this are a positivist and you believe that everything that happens can be explained by science, or maybe you are a person who believes in the supernatural and it would only take 2 minutes for you to immediately declare that ghosts are moving your mug around in your room. But whatever side of the spectrum you fall on, what makes you fall on that side? If you believe in the supernatural, do you only believe in it after all reasonable explanations have been exhausted, or do you jump on the supernatural explanation as the first one? And if that's the case, is there a problem with that? If you believe in rationality with no exceptions, the problem with that, of course, is that it kind of sends you down this very strange rabbit hole where you realize that you could technically explain anything if you want to. If you saw a chair levitating right in front of you, you could just decide that you might be hallucinating, or you might be dreaming, or there might be something else going on, or you might think that somebody spiked your food with some magic mushrooms or something in the morning, and so you are just kind of having a bad trip. It's unlikely, but it's more possible than a levitating chair. And so in these instances, you realize that we can all be Descartes if we want to, and we can doubt things as much as we want to. And there's always a theory that, despite how unlikely it is, can explain anything we see. So does that mean that there are no supernatural occurrences at all, ever? These are the questions. Sherlock Holmes once said that once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however unlikely, must be true. Is that true? Literally none of you asked, but here are some questions.
To me, it seems like there should be alien civilizations everywhere. Why the Fermi paradox? Why haven't we seen them?
Okay, the Fermi paradox. Let's talk about I love talking about the Fermi paradox because there is no Fermi paradox. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, so the Fermi paradox, let's talk a little about the Fermi paradox and the history of it. Enrico Fermi, it's 1950. He's walking with his friends at Los Alamos Nuclear Weapons Lab to the cantina, and there had been this cartoon in the New Yorker. They all read the New Yorker. And the cartoon was trying to explain why there'd been this rash of garbage cans disappearing in New York. And this cartoon said, oh, it's UFOs. Because this is already, it's 1950. The first big UFO craze happened in 47. So they were laughing about this as they're walking, and they started being physicists, started talking about interstellar travel, interstellar propulsion, blah, blah, blah. Conversation goes on for a while. Conversation turns to something else, they've gone to other things. About 40 minutes later, over lunch, Fermi blurts out, well, where is everybody? Right? Typical Fermi sort of thing. He'd done the calculation in his head, and he suddenly realized that, look, if intelligence is common, that even traveling at sublight speeds, a civilization could cross, kind of hop from one star system to the other and spread out across the entire galaxy in a few 100,000 years. And he realized this, and so he was like, why aren't they here now? And that was the beginning of the Fermi paradox. It actually got picked up as a formal thing in 1975 in a paper by Hart, where he actually kind of went through this calculation and showed and said, well, there's nobody here now, therefore there's nobody anywhere. That, Okay, so that is what we will call the direct Fermi paradox. Why aren't they here now? But something happened where people, after SETI began, where people started to, there's this idea of the great silence. People got this idea in their head that like, oh, we've been looking for decades now for signals of extraterrestrial intelligence, and we haven't found any. Therefore, there's nothing out there. So we'll call that the indirect Fermi paradox. And there absolutely is no indirect Fermi paradox for the most mundane of reasons, which is money. There's never been any money to look. SETI was always done by researchers who were kind of like scabbing some time, some extra time from their other projects to, look a little bit at the sky with a telescope. Telescopes are expensive. So, Jason Wright, one of my collaborators, he and his students did a study where they looked at the entire search space for SETI, and imagine that's an ocean, all the different stars you have to look at, the radio frequencies you have to look at, when you look, how often you look. And then they summed up all the SETI searches that had ever been done. They went through the literature. And what they found was if that search space, if the sky is an ocean and you're looking for fish, how much of the ocean have we looked at? And it turns out to be a hot tub. That's how much of the ocean that we've looked up. We've dragged a hot tub's worth of ocean water up and there was no fish in it. And so now are we going to say, oh, well, there's no fish in the ocean, right? So there is absolutely, positively no indirect Fermi paradox. We just haven't looked. But we're starting to look. So that's what's, finally we're starting to look. That's what's exciting. The direct Fermi paradox, there are so many ways out of that, right? There's a book called 77 Solutions to the Fermi Paradox that it just, you can pick your favorite one. It just doesn't carry a lot of weight because there's so many ways around it. We did an actual simulation, my group, Jonathan Carroll, one of my collaborators, we actually simulated the galaxy and we simulated probes moving at sublight speed from one star to the other, gathering resources, heading to the next one. And so we could actually track the expansion wave across the galaxy, have one abiogenesis event, and then watch the whole galaxy get colonized or settled. And it is absolutely true that wave crosses, Hart was right, Fermi was right, that wave crosses very quickly. But civilizations don't last forever, right? So one question is, when did they visit? When did they come to Earth, right? So if you give civilizations a finite lifetime, let them last 10,000, 100,000 years, what you find is you now have a steady state. Civilizations are dying. They're coming back. They're traveling between the stars. What you find then is you can have big holes opened up. You can have regions of space where there is nobody for, millions of years. And so if we're living in one of those bubbles right now, then maybe we were visited, but we were visited 100 million years ago. And there was a paper that Gavin Schmidt and I did that showed that if there was a civilization, whether it was like dinosaurs or aliens that was here 100 million years ago, there's no way to tell. There's no record left over. The fossil record is too sparse. The only way maybe you could tell is by looking at the isotopic strata to see if there was anything reminiscent of an industrial civilization. But the idea that, you'd be able to find iPhones or toppled buildings after 100 million years there's no way.
So if there was an alien camp here, an alien village, a small civilization,
right,
maybe even a large civilization,
even a large civilization, even if it was
100 million years ago,
and it lasted 10,000 years, fossil record's not going to have it. Yeah. The fossil record is too sparse, right? Most things don't fossilize.
Yeah.
And 10,000 years is a blink in the eye of geological time. So Gavin called this the Silurian hypothesis after the Doctor Who episode with the lizard creatures, the Silurians. And so that paper got a lot of press, but it was it was an important idea. And it was really Gavin's. I was just helping with the astrobiology, that to recognize that we could have been visited a long time ago. There just would be no record. Yeah. It's kind of mind blowing.
It's really mind blowing.
Yeah.
And it's also a good reminder that we've been intelligent, species have been here for a very short amount of time.
Very short amount of time. Yeah. This is not to say that there was whenever I gave, I was on Joe Rogan for exactly this paper, and I had to always emphasize, we're not saying there was a Silurian, but we're just saying that if there was, that's why I loved Gavin's question. Gavin's question was just like, how could you tell? right? It was a very beautifully scientific question. That's what we were really showing, is that you really, unless you did a very specific kind of search, which nobody's done so far, that, there's not an obvious way to tell that there could have been civilizations here earlier on.
Should be illegal. Corona built a billboard with just their logo. By day, it looks harmless. Just a basic Corona beer label in its signature yellow. But then, golden hour happens. The sun hits their billboard and creates the shape of their bottle, revealing a secret message that you only see for 15 minutes a day. No screens, no tech, just sunlight.
Well, it didn't take long. It only took 2 years, literally to the day, December 27th, for my Filipino wife to become fully Americanized, hate everything about me and what I provide, and decide to leave. Yeah, welcome to the shittiest post that I'm ever going to make. There's a lot to it, and I'm not going to go into it, okay? But suffice to say, after providing and going on the Disney World trip, which included the funeral for my mom, I got up to day 6, I think, on that, because it all broke down at Magic Kingdom. Fucking ironic. And I didn't post anything after that, because when we got back from Orlando to St. Simons, Georgia, I was greeted with the announcement from Jayanne that she wanted a separation. And then I discovered through text that she had been discussing this with her family and making plans to also take the children. So, that's heavy, right? That's a nuke. And I'm gonna go into my bunker. So I came downstairs in my nice 4-story mansion and just stayed by myself through Christmas Eve and through Christmas Day. And I missed Christmas with my children. My in-laws, my mother and my father-in-law, and Jayanne, they proceeded to open the presents without me. Presents all of which I bought. Yeah, the separation is a separation. I'm lucky enough to have a big house, and the logistics of it can be met right away, but I spent Christmas utterly by myself. And it's coming up on New Year's Eve, and I'm still alone. Because there's no communication from her. Why? Because she's communicating with her parents. She has the total backing and validation of her parents. Plus TikTok. All external sources of validation. And it's my position, my feelings are not relevant. She's got it figured out. She's got a plan. I'm waiting to hear what the plan is, and we'll see what happens from that point. But I'm pretty. I'm at peace with what has occurred, what could occur. I am done being Mr. Fix-It. Fix-It Felix. I'm not going to be the simp, nice guy, Fix-It Felix anymore. A relationship takes 2 people. And she made the decision for the separation. She's made the announcement and made plans with family to take our children back to the Philippines. And she's an adult. She has accountability. It's on her to come to me and explain to me what her plan is, such that it is, and what can be done about it. So, surprise, no more countdown with the great fun in Disney World. It was a fucking disaster. And, that's the truth. Social media is not about the truth, but I'm about the truth, so that's what I give you. Thanks.
I think this is one of the coolest photos on the internet. And let me explain. This is a photo of Dr. Religia. He's a heart surgeon, and in 1987, he performed the first ever heart transplant in Poland. Now, this is wild. The surgery was 23 hours long, all done by one man and his assistant. You can see his assistant passed out in the back of the photo. Have a good look. And the photo is taken while he's watching the vitals of the patient after the surgery. Interestingly, the patient actually outlived the surgeon. I think the patient passed away like 30 years later. And this is a sick guy. Remember, people who get heart transplants already have a lot of health problems. Unfortunately, he outlived the surgeon themselves. So I think Dr. Religia passed away in around 2009. But interesting photo. I think it's a testament to the tenacity and perseverance of human effort.
Don't say I'm sorry at work. Don't say I'm sorry. Don't say I apologize. Don't say my apologies. We're not going to apologize. We will acknowledge or hold ourselves accountable, so you can say, thank you for bringing that to my attention. That's my mistake. Or you don't have to say that at all. You can say, thanks for bringing that to my attention. Understood, acknowledged, noted, but do not say, I'm sorry.
Slightly different one for me today. So I know that technically you should not really drink, but if you are going to drink, I thought you might like to know a little bit of science that I discovered recently. So when you feel hungover, mostly it is not the dehydration that's the thing that hurts. What happens is when you drink alcohol, it gets into your bloodstream and your liver breaks it down using an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. And that process produces something called acetaldehyde. And that stuff is horrible. It triggers inflammation, particularly in blood vessels, which is why you have this thumping headache. It's also really like horrible toxic in your kind of intestinal system. So that's why you have nausea, that's why you have vomiting. It's not nice at all. But what if you could give your body a little head start on that process of breaking down the ethanol? Because it looks like you sort of can, right? There are these two microorganisms. Both of these things were discovered like over 100 years ago. You can kind of think of them as sort of probiotics, like positive bacteria. Anyway, what they do is they gobble up ethanol and they break it down into, after a couple of steps, into carbon dioxide and water, which are very inert in your system. So if you have these two little bits of bacteria that are sitting in your stomach when you're drinking, what they can do is they can metabolize that alcohol for you in your gut so that less of it ends up going through to your bloodstream for that whole, horrible acetaldehyde step.
According to the Facebook conspiracy theorist, Miss Mops, an astonishing claim has surfaced. Nelson Mandela didn't actually live to see the world celebrate his release. Instead, Mops insists, Mandela died in 1985. The argument? Winnie Mandela knew the truth all along. It said that her divorce from Mandela after his release wasn't a personal decision, but rather a forced move to protect the cover-up. The man she divorced, according to Mops, was not the real Mandela, but an imposter. There's another intriguing piece of evidence Mops points to. The lyrics of Johnny Clegg's famous song, Asimbonanga, a song released in 1987. Clegg sings, Asimbonang, Mandela Tina, we have not seen Mandela, followed by Lafekona, in the place where he is, and Lafelele Kona, in the place where he is buried. Could these haunting lines be alluding to Mandela's burial rather than his imprisonment? And then there's the curious case of the 67 minutes observed each year on Mandela Day. Why 67 minutes? Exactly. Mops argues that it marks the age Mandela was when he was supposedly killed in 1985. And Mandela's prison number? 46664? What is the significance of this strange number?
To the man who made a video about using ChatGPT to curate a grocery list, you're genius. I just want to personally say you are a genius. Let me just tell you a little bit more about this. You basically go into your ChatGPT. You can pick an amount, let's say, because this is how he explained it. Let's say you want to spend $100. And in this economy, this is perfect for this economy. You go in there, you tell ChatGPT, I want to spend $100 at whatever grocery store you want to go to, whatever you put in there, Mariano's, Kroger, Trader Joe's, it doesn't matter. And you tell it to create a list for 3 meals a day, if that's what you want. You could do 2 meals a day. You could do whatever you want. It will create you a grocery list, everything to buy. It will also give you directions on how to cook it. And you can add caveats to this, meaning, let's say you're high protein. You can add that, everything high protein. Let's say you want low sodium. Let's say you want high fiber. You could literally add anything you want and it will create you a grocery list and a full meal plan. from whatever grocery store you pick for whatever budget you decide.
Predictions for February 2025. Check this out, my friends. Whoa, man, this is crazy. The media turns on Elon Musk. This is unbelievable. The tragic roller coaster of accidents. And guess where they are happening, my friends? This is crazy stuff. And deadly aversion. Oh, these are those weird weather phenomena. My God, look at this. New discovery shocks the whole world. Yo, what do you think would be discovered that could shock the whole world? Leave your thoughts in the comment section, my friend, please. You see, maybe something in the oceans or in the skies. What do you think? Or it's about the orbs? You leave your thoughts, please. And a record-breaking low temperature thing will happen. Oh, this is very weird. Low temperatures, more than the ones that the rivers freeze like we've been seeing. Wow, crazy stuff. Suddenly, supply shock of popular brand. What? This is amazing or unpredictable. Crazy stuff. And the markets rally with the new president. Huh. What do you think about that? That is for the trading people. Good web source. All this is for entertainment purposes. Let's wait and see as you leave your comments.
There are two unique people who have taken the role of Jesus, and this role changed their lives. The role of Jesus has a special way of changing people. Number one, Jim Caviezel. Jim Caviezel was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood at the start of the 2000s. He starred in hit movies that typically grossed over $90 million, like The Thin Red Line and The Count of Monte Cristo. But all of a sudden, that disappeared. How is that even possible? Although it seemed like he was on track for a long and successful career, something changed after he took on one unforgettable role. And many of us know the role. It was the role of Jesus Christ in Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ. Can you imagine? You want to know what's crazy? Mel Gibson warned him. When Jim was offered the role of Jesus Christ in The Passion of the Christ, it wasn't a decision to be taken lightly. Mel Gibson, the director of the film, knew this better than anyone. Before Jim accepted, Gibson pulled him aside for a serious conversation. He didn't sugarcoat the situation. He told Jim, "If you take this role, you'll never work in this town again." This wasn't a casual warning. Gibson was fully aware of the controversy surrounding the film, even before it was released. He knew that playing such a significant and polarizing figure could put Jim in the crosshairs of Hollywood criticism and public scrutiny. Many actors might have hesitated, or even backed out, after hearing something like that. But Jim's response was immediate and unwavering. He later recalled his words to Gibson, saying, "We all have to embrace our crosses."
So I go to the bank to withdraw money out of my savings account, $9,000, and the teller goes, "Well, what are you using the money for?" And I say, "Hookers." And he kind of snickers and turns his back around, goes to the computer, does his little thing, types in my account, spends quite a few minutes staring at my account, calls a lady over, and she looks at my account, and they're both got their heads together, little, going back and forth. And then all of a sudden he comes back over and he goes, "Well, we need to know who you work for." "Okay, why?" I ask him. And he says, "Well, anytime somebody needs going to withdraw this amount of money, we need to know who you work for and what your occupation is." So I said, "I work for the government. I work for NASA. And the money's for hookers." And that still isn't good enough. So he calls the branch manager at a different branch and says, "Hey, blah, 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 this lady, blah, 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 blah." Then the branch manager gets on the phone with me and he says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, we really need to know who you work for." And I say, "Really? Okay." So I give them my motherfucking business card just to get my $9,000. Okay. My $9,000 that them little motherfuckers are just babysitting good little bitches, and they won't give me my money, right? So I'm just like, whatever. Here's my business card. Clearly, you motherfuckers can see who I work for because my payroll is deposited into the checking account, which is attached to the savings account. And then I transfer money from every time I get paid to my savings account, and they can see those transfers, but they still gotta know who I work for, right? So I finally get my fucking cash after giving them my business card, right? I get home and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck? These little motherfuckers are only babysitting my money that I earned. It's not their fucking money. I'm not going to daddy asking for a fucking loan. It's my goddamn money, motherfuckers. Get the fuck out of my business.
Well, my friends, lots of interesting, strange, and believable stuff that we've just seen today. I'd like you to leave your comments about it. But there's a video that was more intriguing to me than most. The one with the people that played the role of Jesus in different movie scenes. Well, that was quite unexpected to me. Good vibes source. The life that good vibes creator lived on this world as a man is one of a kind. And surely there's a lot to learn from that story. So we normally read from this book here of wisdom, because it will help us in many ways to live according to the ways that the Creator would have wanted. Today, this is what it tells us from Ephesians 5. Be imitators of God, therefore, as dearly loved children, and live a life of love, just as Christ loved us, and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. Well, it's interesting relating with that story I've just told you. Good vibe soul. Let's give thanks and talk to our Creator for the great love He has for us. Dear Lord Father, we acknowledge your presence in our lives. We thank you, Father, for that. Thank you for your goodness, dear Lord, and unending mercies and love. Thank you, dear Lord Father, for the videos we've just reacted to. Dear Lord, may this episode reach millions of people in this world, Father. May they see your goodness, dear Lord, and impact their lives with positivity.